and welcome to Unveil Your Brilliance with Angilie Kapoor here on the Win Win Women TV network, where each week we explore helping you to break free from the illusions that are holding you back. My name is Angilie Kapoor. I am a career and conscious leadership coach, a multi book author, and inspirational speaker, as well as your host. I'm also the founder of Oversight Global, my coaching company, where we are on a mission to address the consciousness crisis in the world one leader at a time. Everything seemed possible when I looked through the eyes of a child, and every once in a while I remember I still have the chance to be wild. Now, that is a quote from author Nikki Rowe. Now, as adults, we easily forget what freedoms we had when we were children, how some of our undealt wounds from our childhood have actually held us back in our adulthood. Now, that's something to think about as we explore today's topic on uncovering your brilliance through enlightenment. Now, as always, I like to share a quote with you that relates to the topic of our episode discussions, and this week is no different. On today's episode, we have an amazing guest joining us to explore how exploring our inner child and soul integration can lead to enlightenment. But before I bring her on, again, just a friendly reminder to keep a lookout for our episode segments, our show pillars, which we make sure we touch on each week. And again, they are brilliant mindset, breaking free, and brilliant strategies during our discussion. So without further ado, let's go ahead and welcome our guest for today, Dr. Simi Ahuja, onto the show. Now, I am so thrilled to have our guest for today here with us. Now, before I bring her on, let me tell you a bit about her. Now, she is a family medicine physician and a medical intuitive. Now, through mind body medicine, she's been able to heal herself from narcissistic personality disorder that stemmed from childhood abuse, and she now helps others to do the same. Now, many people are able to heal themselves of physical illnesses, but few are able to heal themselves from mental illnesses, which is why she has particularly taken on this mission. So get ready to be hit with some knowledge, be inspired and empowered as we welcome Dr. Simi Ahuja to the show. Dr. Simi, thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to have you here.
Thank you, Angilie. I'm so excited to be here as well, to be having this conversation. Thank you.
Sounds great. Yeah. So today we're talking about uncovering your brilliance through enlightenment. And so I know that some of the ladies might not, be aware of some of the terminology that we're using. So I wanted to first kind of define that for them so they're not kind of going through our episode going, what does that mean? So can you kind of help us define enlightenment, inner child, soul integration?
Yeah, I'll start with inner child and soul integration. So essentially, what happens is when we experience trauma in our life, a part of our soul gets fragmented. And
Okay.
that's what's known as inner child. Some people call it shadow work, like Carl Jung called it shadow work. And then he also later on coined the term the inner child.
Okay.
And it's a part of you that has separated from the major soul. And I don't know if you've heard about in like holy books, people talk about your wholeness.
Hmm.
What does that mean? It's that fragmented parts of ourselves when we begin to integrate those parts into ourselves, hence the term integration, that's what leads to our wholeness. Yeah.
And then what about enlightenment?
Yes. So enlightenment is honestly, very few people talk about it. And I understand why. It's taking responsibility for everything that's happened in your life. When
Mm,
you do that, you come to a place of joy within the heart. You come to a place of acceptance. And that's what leads to enlightening of the heart, meaning your heart is lighter. You're no longer grieving. You're no longer in blame, shame, angry, annoyed. It's just simply being in the joy of it all.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that being present helps with that as well. Practicing gratitude and being present and not really being stuck in, thinking about what's happened in the past and going through it over and over in your head and, oh, I wish I had done that different and why did that happen and worrying about the future, those types of things. So, yeah.
Yes, present moment is like a marathon. It's like preparing for the marathon. Doing the inner child work is the marathon itself. When we experience feelings, whether it's annoyance or frustration,
Hmm.
you'll notice as you begin to do this work that there's a whole iceberg
Hmm.
underneath it all. And it's our job to be present to our feelings.
Right.
So when we think about the present moment, oftentimes I feel, for me anyways, I was a little confused. Do I
Hmm.
mean, as I'm sitting here drinking my tea, do I need to get real present to the tea? Yes. And also, what is emerging from you as you're drinking that tea? What do you
Right.
feel? Right? Are you
Yeah.
feeling nostalgic? Are you feeling hurried? Are you feeling frustrated? All those good things. So
Right, right. Yeah, definitely, definitely. So, yeah, let's go ahead and get into doing some inner child work and, exploring enlightenment. So, when we talk about inner child, I think, people have heard that term before and it's kind of been something that they've grown familiar with, but I don't think a lot of people kind of understand what people are saying when they say inner child and why it's really important in terms of, healing and creating that deeper sense of self awareness and self knowing, really utilizing that to really move forward in living, as your authentic self and living an authentic life. So, can we talk about that a little bit?
yeah, absolutely. So when you say living the authentic self, it's hard to grasp that even. What does that mean, right?
Hmm.
Day to day, moment to moment, we're feeling frustrated, agitated, annoyed, and we are. Unless we, realize it, we are probably going to deny it, right? I know I did. And
Hmm.
that's our MO. And when we begin to look at this inner child, we become aware of what it is that we're feeling. And
Hmm.
that's what self awareness is. It's being aware of the self. How are you thinking in a moment? How are you speaking in a moment? How are you acting in a moment? And when we begin to recognize those feelings and those patterns within ourselves, that's when the awakening begins to happen.
Okay.
And the thing is that these inner children are responsible for those feelings. So when
Okay.
you become aware of those feelings, it's kind of a catch 22, so to speak, because the more you do the inner child work, you have to become aware of your feelings in order to do the inner child work. The thing is, the more you become aware of it, the more you do the inner child work. So it's like a
Right.
cycle that develops, and you
Hmm.
have to start somewhere. So that initially you may feel that numbness to feelings like, okay, I don't feel anything. Well, you do. You're just not aware of it because
Right.
that's what awakening is about, right? And
Hmm.
if you were already awake, you probably would not have incarnated on this planet, because that is the purpose of our soul, is to become aware of its divinity. But in order for us to become aware of our divinity, we first have to become aware of our feelings.
Right. Right. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So I really have found, kind of in my own exploration of self awareness and self discovery that, like you're saying, as we become more aware of our feelings, a lot of that has really been attached to our inner child and things that have happened in our childhood. I do a lot of work with mindset. Our mindset is actually solidified at the age of 7, and it's from experiences that we've had in surroundings and environments that, we were in as children. And then we really kind of bring that into adulthood. I have this joke with some other of my colleagues that, a lot of we're just kind of adults walking around with child mentalities. So, yeah. So can we kind of go more into some of the things that we have, experienced in childhood and how we're kind of carrying those childhood feelings around and how they're affecting us in adulthood?
Yeah, and you bring up a great point that while research has shown that the mindset gets solidified by the age of 7, I don't want that to be the end all be all, because
Right.
there's a way to shift that. And now research has shown neuroplasticity, right?
Hmm.
Meaning, yes, just because your mindset was set a certain way by the age of 7 doesn't mean you're punished for life, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, there is
We can change
neuroplasticity. Yes,
it.
yes, exactly. And we change it through the inner child work. Because our mind is set by the age of 7, like you said, we tend to act like a child in an adult body. When we are angry, we are having a temper tantrum. It's like a part of us, child, who's having a temper tantrum. So we're in an adult body behaving like a child. So if you can imagine, if our mindset is at this age of 7 or whenever
Mhm.
the trauma happens, see, the brain development stops when the trauma happens.
Right.
So, in case that you had trauma when you were, say, 2 years old, well, that's where your brain development has arrested. The things that you were meant to learn developmentally during that age, you are not going to learn it because
Okay.
brain stops developing. And when we get older and our brain hasn't developed, obviously we're going to make childish decisions. And
Right.
that includes our business, that includes our finances.
The
It has
relationships.
trouble with business and finances and relationships and parenting. It's because we are a child in an adult body running a business
Right.
with that same thinking or having a relationship, partnerships, right? I mean,
Hmm.
I think our relationships have never been so dysfunctional than what they are today. And
Hmm.
that is the reason because we all have experienced trauma, but we don't know, we don't even realize how it's affecting our day to day life. So as I started to do this work, I began to realize that some of the decisions were actually very childish that I made in my own career. And
Right.
as I began to do this work, I became aware of my patterns. So then
Hmm.
through awareness, I could shift those patterns,
Hmm.
right? I didn't have to continue to show up like a child. I can today be the grown woman that I am because I've
Right.
integrated, right? That's the kind of work it takes. So, and that's what we call wisdom. It
Right.
comes from within us as we do this work. This awareness brings wisdom. So, knowledge is one thing. Yes, we can have book knowledge, physicians, lawyers, whatnot, all of the trade schools, right? The education system. You can get all that, but you don't get the wisdom, right?
Right.
So,
Right.
while I learned to be an MD, well, when do I use aspirin versus a heart medicine?
Hmm.
It can both look the same because if somebody comes in with chest pain, I have the knowledge. And I'm just going to share this example because I think it's a big one. When you go see a doctor, they're unfortunately also operating from that place of childishness. They have the
Right.
knowledge. They haven't, most of them have not worked through the trauma. And so when you're coming in with chest pain, because they're in so much fear, they're going to go towards a heart medicine because that's what they have learned. When I started to do this work, I noticed how I approached medicine differently. Meaning, if somebody came in with chest pain, instead of just throwing them in, yeah, let's get the cardiac. I mean, yes, don't get me wrong, that's an important part and we need to do that. But I also tuned into the wisdom of what I was
Hmm.
carrying. And I treated this patient with, I think it was ibuprofen, and she went home in half an hour instead of sending her to the emergency room for, cardiac workup and EKG and all. Again, there's a time and a place. I'm not diminishing that. And I want to stress that. And there's also a time and a place when, here, can we just try this ibuprofen? Because I'm not in so much fear that something's going to happen to you. So it's that place of wisdom. And when we're not coming from there, we create actually a lot of trauma. Like imagine sending somebody to the emergency room, right? Who's
Hmm.
having musculoskeletal chest pain and having them go through the whole workup of EKG and labs and possibly even cardiac cath just so I could feel better. Just because I didn't have the wisdom, while I had the knowledge, I didn't have the wisdom to know
Hmm.
when to use what.
I really love how you kind of go into that. I think it's important that we all kind of recognize what you just said, that you can have knowledge, but not necessarily wisdom. I know from my own experience going through being a manager in healthcare for 10 years, that was really where I started my self discovery and self awareness journey. Because when I first got into my first management role, I really struggled with, really getting my footing and really figuring out how to do my job well. And, I did all the things that everybody was telling me to do. And my mentor and my director, they kept telling me, read this book. You need to learn about this type of skill. You need to be a master in this type of skill. So I read hundreds of books. I took all kinds of courses. I went to all kinds of conferences, but they never helped me. all they did was inundate me with information and confuse me even more. And it wasn't until, all of my anxiety and all the internal struggles that I was experiencing really started to build up over several months. And I had this atypical blow up during a team meeting where I just really had this pivotal moment where I recognized that I was starting to become somebody that I didn't like or recognize. And even my staff members were like, oh my gosh, what's happening to her? And that was really the pivotal moment for me where I really started to dive into self awareness and I got into mindset and emotional intelligence and stuff like that. And that's how I really started to discover, the better I started to get to know myself and lead myself, I was able to be a more effective leader to my staff. And I really felt more comfortable and confident in what I was doing. I say that because that really was, where I recognized that, but like you're saying, the wisdom comes from within. So all of those 200 books and some odd courses that I took before, I really started to use that knowledge and tap into my inner wisdom, and it came a lot easier, whereas before I was struggling to be like, how do I implement what they just told me? So yeah,
Right.
I love that you mentioned that we can have all kinds of knowledge from external sources like university and textbooks, but we don't necessarily integrate that with our wisdom because that comes from within. So I love that.
Yeah, and that's beautifully said because what I'm hearing you say is all this knowledge, when you were bombarded with this knowledge, it actually took you away from yourself.
Exactly.
That's why
Yep.
you became the person you didn't want to be. And same here, right?
Mhm. Yes.
Because when we're not tapping into that innate wisdom and our inner knowing and who we are, we become crabby, you know?
Exactly. Yeah, because it's really, you're being bombarded with all this information and before you know it, you're like you're saying, you're being dragged away from your authentic self is what I, refer to it. But when you actually start to tap into that, all of that stuff makes more sense and comes so much easier. I mean, I even found that things that I struggled with that I hadn't necessarily gained a knowledge in, I automatically knew, like instinctively. So yeah, I think that's beautiful that you point that out. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, of course.
So another question that kind of popped up is, I know that we've been talking about kind of how trauma can affect our inner child and how we really need to work to tap into that and heal that. But there's also good things that can come from our inner child, like remembering the freedoms of unconditional happiness. And so, even though we want to explore our inner child to kind of heal that stuff that happened before and to become more self-aware and do that soul integration, why is it important that we can kind of continue to be connected with our inner child and what are the benefits of doing that?
Yeah, beautiful question. I love it. So, yes, so first, it's hard. And actually, I was just thinking about this last night. Initially, it is very challenging to feel these feelings because this inner children are angry at what has happened to them.
Right. Hmm.
And it's righteous anger, right? Rightfully so. However, while the journey is hard in the beginning, as you continue this curve, what
Hmm.
you are going to realize is who you really are at the core. And that's what you were referring to when we started this conversation,
Hmm.
your authentic self,
Right.
meaning realize that you are God, you are
Hmm.
the creator, you are the manifester. And before that happens, because that's more towards like the higher up in the level, so your spiritual evolution or
Right.
later on down the road. But what begins to happen in everyday moment is that your intuition will become strengthened.
Right.
Meaning, right now, what I've noticed is that the ego and the intuition are kind of like this. They're interspersed. Like it's hard to discern whether it's the ego or the intuition. But as you do the inner child work diminishes the ego, so the intuition begins to rise. So
Hmm.
you begin to notice your own gifts. You begin to remember your gifts, and we do, whether some people believe in this or not, and this has just been my experience, we do bring these gifts forward from past lifetimes
Right.
because we learned it in a certain lifetime. I don't know. Have you ever noticed that you start doing something and before you know it, you're better at it than anyone else?
Yeah.
You spent the same amount of time, but you're much better at it. Why
Hmm.
is that? That's the remembering. So not
Mm.
to shortchange that, but to acknowledge those little victories and
Right.
say, yes, okay, this means I have done enough work so that I can see who I am, what my intuition are. That's how I became a medical intuitive. Well, I'm sure I was born with it, but I was not aware of this gift until
Right.
I started doing the inner child work. And all of a sudden it just emerged from me. And I was like, wow, I can do this. And I
Hmm.
know a lot of us want to open their gifts. We're like, what can I do to open my gifts? And there's so many classes. But really, if you just tune into yourself, you show love to that inner child by simply being present to their emotions. That's an
Hmm.
act of self-love. When you do that, the ego will go down, the anger will go down, and the intuition will begin to rise.
Nice. Nice. And so why is it important that we kind of tap into our inner child every now and again? What is the benefit of doing that?
Well, for one, you can have better relationships. You can be a
Okay.
better parent. You can have better finances, better job opportunities, because
Hmm.
it's all within you. We think that it's outside of you, but the foundation for all the abundance and the joy and the peace that we long and want is within us. And that's where the work begins, because when you're fully integrated, you're in alignment
Right.
with the God source, right?
Hmm.
And when you're in alignment, that's when manifestation happens.
Right.
That's
Right.
when we get to live the life that we want to live. That's when we become our authentic self.
Yes. Beautiful. I love that. So for the ladies watching who are intrigued and, kind of want to start this work, what are, some tips or strategies that you can give them to where they can start doing that like tomorrow?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like anything else, inner child work is a very deep process. Doesn't mean it's easy, it is simple, and it takes your willingness, right? It takes your vigilance. That's why, not to get religion into here, but that's why Jesus said, be vigilant only for the kingdom of God, meaning be vigilant towards your emotions, be vigilant for yourself and love
Mm.
yourself. And so the first thing to do would be figure out an emotion or feel into the emotion that you experience. And it could be as simple as somebody pulled out in front of you when you were driving. How annoyed do we all get? I know I do still, right? So tap into that emotion. Where do you
Mhm.
feel that emotion? So what I call this area is your emotional storage shed. And that's an area between your throat and your heart chakra, right in the middle of your chest here. And
Okay.
all of your memories, past life experiences, emotions are stored right in this area. And I talk about this in my book. If you can just simply bring your awareness to this area when you're feeling a particular emotion, whether it's small frustration, annoyance, it doesn't have to be anything big, right?
Big, yeah.
Yeah, because here's the way the inner child works. If you don't pay attention to these feelings, it's kind of like lights going on. When the reaction happens, you can't stop it in the middle. When you turn the switch on, right, you can't stop the lights from going on right in the middle. If you change your mind, say, oh, I don't want the lights on. Well, too bad. They're going to turn on. You can turn them off, but in the middle of it, you can't do anything.
Hmm.
This is the same way when we are having those reactions, that annoyance, that anger, that rage, there's nothing we can do about it in the moment.
Right.
That's why we tend to feel bad afterwards and say, hey, I'm sorry, but you had no control over it. So Jesus said, forgive them, for they know not what they do.
Mm.
Because when you're in that reaction, you don't know what you're doing. You have no control over it, because these energies literally hijack our central nervous system.
Okay.
So we're not able to control it. So the best thing to do is to be proactive about it.
Right.
Start doing your work from moment to moment to moment, so you don't have those explosions, so you don't have that annoyance, so you don't have that frustration.
Hmm.
That was the benefit I know you were asking earlier. And so when you can tune into and just bring your awareness to that annoyance that you experience when somebody pulled out in front of you, if you can simply be present to it without reacting, that's the present moment. Because when you're in the present moment, as you probably already know, there's something that happens between the two. Emotions don't know time and space. So if you think of that moment, you'll feel that anger or that frustration again, right?
Yes.
So then you
Yes.
can do it later on, like spend 5 minutes in the day, like you're saying, right? 5 minutes
Hmm.
during the day, either in the morning or at night, and think of that situation that happened and the annoyance that you felt, and simply become present to that. So it doesn't have to be in that moment, while it
Right.
can be, and it doesn't have to be. It can be
Yeah.
both.
Yeah, definitely. I think those bigger, like you're saying, those bigger emotions from bigger traumas, like you're saying, compartmentalize them and deal with them in small little pieces,
Yes.
instead of trying to deal with it all at once, and then it just becomes overwhelming.
Right. And because you won't be able to, it's just too much.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So yeah,
Yeah.
you mentioned your book. So tell us a little bit about your book, where people can find it.
Yeah, so the book should be published over the next couple weeks. We're at the proofread. All we need is formatting and publishing then. So it's only a couple weeks away,
Oh,
hopefully.
awesome.
It's called Raising the Inner Child.
Okay.
It's a memoir in a way. So I give personal examples and then I share my psychological realizations and also deviation from the societal norms
Mm,
and how to put things in perspective. So it's a raw talk about destiny, about karma, about vulnerability.
mm,
It's just raw overload. It's very dynamic and a
mm-hmm.
living, breathing book. It's not your typical book. And the editors have also told me that this is a very unique book and it is profoundly personal. So it's very sacred in that sense. Like the
Oh,
stories I share are very personal. And
yeah.
so obviously I had a little bit of hesitancy of putting this out into the world, but it is a beautiful book if you can glean some information. It's more of a reference point to show how unique our journeys are. So
Mm,
just because I went through this stuff doesn't mean it's going to be your experience, but it
right.
is to show how deviated from the societal norms it can be, and
Right.
to
Right.
not put spirituality and inner child work in another box. Because when we put things in a box, we're trying to understand it, which is fine because we do need to understand initially the material so we can do the work, right? But then
Hmm.
you gotta let the box go. You
Right.
can't continue to put things in a box because then you're operating from the mind, and enlightenment is of the heart.
Mm, I love that. Enlightenment is of the heart. I'm gonna have to use that sometime.
Please do.
So where can we find your book when it's out?
Hopefully on Amazon. We haven't, yes, Amazon for sure. And online, we're gonna have all versions, the e-version and the paperback and the hardcover as well. I haven't decided if I'm going to do audio yet, but hopefully that will also become available soon.
Sounds awesome. So yeah, we will definitely put that information on the episode so the ladies can get access to your book when it comes out. I'm so excited for you. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate you having me here today too. It's been a wonderful conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, I thank you so much for all of these shares, your wisdom, your insights, and I know that the ladies are going to learn a lot because I know I definitely have. So thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Angelie.
Okay, and that is it for today's episode on uncovering your brilliance through enlightenment with our special guest, Dr. Simi Ahuja. I want to thank Dr. Simi again for joining us today and for sharing her incredible wisdom and insights with us on how to explore our inner child and soul integration and how that can help us deepen our self awareness and lead to enlightenment. And also, thank you, beautiful soul, for being here with me today as well. As I've mentioned before, I don't believe in coincidences, and you, Bright Light, were meant to be here to receive whatever it is you were meant to receive from this episode today. So keep it up. Keep showing up and making progress towards unveiling your brilliance. Now, if you're here with me live, be sure to join me in the second half of the show for Brilliant Connections, where I get to meet you and get to know you, and you're able to ask me questions that you might have from today's episode topic or the show. If you're catching this on replay, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you'll check out our previous episodes as well on winwinwomen.tv/show/unveil your brilliance, as well as join me live next week. Remember, like author Nikki Rose said, everything seemed possible when I looked through the eyes of a child, and every once in a while I remember I still have the chance to be wild. So, beautiful lady, remember your inner child. That beautiful little girl within you is still within you for you to love and learn from. Learn from her and allow her to help you become free from those illusions that have been created in your adulthood and to help you unveil your brilliance. Thank you so much for watching. Take care, and I'll see you next week. My ladies here with me live. I will see you in just a few seconds.